I never expected that buying a house in Green Valley Estates would lead to one of the most intense legal battles and personal feuds of my life. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I was just another homeowner looking for peace and privacy. What I didn't realize was that I was stepping into the territory of Evelyn Richardsina, a woman who practically ran the HOA like her own little kingdom. At first, things seemed fine. The neighborhood was quiet, the homes were well maintained, and the surrounding woods offered the kind of seclusion I'd always wanted. I had no idea that beneath the trimmed hedges and smiling neighbors lurked a growing conflict over land, power, and control. It started with a letter. Use of common land for hunting. I stared at the paper, confused. I hadn't hunted on common land. I had exclusive permission from Frank Williams, the elderly owner of the 80-acre forested property behind my house. Frank and I had struck up a friendship not long after I moved in. He liked that I respected the land and followed safety rules. In fact, he gave me written permission to access his land during hunting season. Still, the HOA insisted I was in violation. I tried to explain, attaching a copy of Frank's permission letter to my appeal. I figured it was just a misunderstanding, but then I received another letter. This one came with a fine $500. That's when I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I attended the next HOA meeting hoping to clear things up. The meeting was held in the community center, and Evelyn sat at the front like a queen holding court. She was flanked by Marcus Bennett, the HOA vice president, and Richard Cooper, the treasurer. When my turn came to speak, I calmly explained the situation, emphasizing that I had written permission from Frank Williams and had not trespassed on HOA. Evelyn barely let me finish, regardless of any permission you claim to have. She said with a tight smile, "The community has expectations of safety and decorum. Firearms, even for hunting, pose a risk to our residents." I could see the narrative, for Evelyn had decided I was a threat to her perfect neighborhood image. And now she was using the HOA rules to push me out or make me fall in line. I tried to reason with them. Legality of my actions, but it didn't matter. Evelyn raised her hand to cut me off. "We've made our decision. The fine stands." After the meeting, I approached Frank to let him know what was happening. He was livid. "I can't tell you what to do on my land," he said. "I never gave them permission to use it for anything. If anything, they're the ones who've been trespassing. I've seen people walking their dogs on those trails, sitting on benches they've installed without asking me. A seed in my mind. I started paying more attention. Sure enough, I noticed signs around the edges of the forest marked Green Valley nature trails, complete with little maps and decorative posts. There were benches too, all placed without Frank's knowledge or permission. I returned to another HOA meeting a month later, determined to make my case. This time, I brought photos of the unauthorized installations on Frank's land, along with his signed statement revoking any implied permission for HOA use. I calmly presented them to the board and the assembled residents. Evelyn's reaction was icy. "The community has been using that space for years," she said, brushing aside the documents. "If Mr. Williams had an issue, he should have brought it up a long time ago." "He's bringing it up now," I said. "And unless you have legal easement rights which you don't, you're trespassing." That's when she played her next card. Evelyn claimed the HOA had applied for a grant to develop the area into an official nature park, the Evelyn Richardson Nature Preserve. She even held up glossy brochures showing walking paths, a playground, and a garden. I looked closer and saw something shocking. Frank's property was labeled as HOA common land. There was no mention of private ownership. Later that night, I went to visit Frank again and showed him the brochure. He was stunned. They never asked me for this. I never signed anything. "I'm thinking of selling the land anyway. These medical bills are killing me. I'm not going to let them steal it out from under me." "If you're serious about selling," I said carefully, "maybe I'd be interested in buying." That night, I stayed up researching property law and adverse possession rules in our state. It was clear the HOA had overstepped big time. Not only had they failed to gain legal rights to the land, they had actively misrepresented ownership in public documents and fundraising materials. The next morning, I called Amanda Lewis, a real estate attorney I'd been referred to. I brought her all my evidence, Frank's ownership documents, the trail photos, the brochures, and meeting minutes. This is more than just a boundary dispute, she said. If the HOA raised money using these materials and they knowingly misrepresented ownership, that could be fraud. With Amanda's help, I began negotiating the purchase of Frank's land. We agreed on a fair price, $750,000. It was a stretch financially, but I had savings and a small inheritance. More importantly, I was done being bullied during the week leading up to the closing. Things in the neighborhood took a dark turn. Someone spray-painted "animal killer" on my trash bins. Sarah, a neighbor and one of the few allies I had, told me Evelyn had been spreading rumors at school functions and even hinted that my hunting was dangerous to children. It didn't matter. I finalized the purchase and recorded the deed. I now owned all 80 acres of the disputed land the next day. Fines now over $5,000. I invited them in. "Before you go any further," I said, placing a folder on the table, "you should look at this." Evelyn opened it and froze. Her face drained of color as she realized what she was holding: the deed to the land her park was supposed to be built on. My name was right there in bold print. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," I said, "and I'm notifying you now that all HOA activity on my property must stop immediately. That includes your benches, your signs, your so-called nature trails." Evelyn tried to bluster. "We have rights, not legal rights," I said. "And you've never paid taxes on the land, never received permission, and never disclosed the actual ownership during your fundraising. That's a problem." Marcus started fidgeting nervously. Evelyn, seeing her grip slipping, tried to regain control. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I've built this community. Everyone respects me. You won't destroy that." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," I said calmly. "I just want my rights respected the same way you expect yours to be." As they left, I handed them a cease and desist letter drafted by Amanda. It outlined their unauthorized use of the property and demanded the immediate withdrawal of all development plans. Later that day, I received a visit from Emily Chen, a local reporter who'd caught wind of the dispute. I gave her a careful rundown of events, enough to raise questions without making outright accusations. The following morning, Sarah texted me, "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Evelyn's furious. Be ready." I moved here because it was peaceful and safe. Now I'm afraid to let my children play in our yard, knowing there are armed men prowling the woods. I tried to interject that hunting season was limited and that I always followed strict safety protocols. But the narrative had already been established. Eventually, Evelyn called Officer Mike Davis, 45-year-old local police officer who happened to live in the community. When he arrived, he reviewed my hunting license and confirmed that I had been acting within the law. "As far as hunting regulations go, he's in compliance," Officer Davis explained. "And if he has permission from the landowner, there's no trespassing issue. This would be a civil matter between the HOA and the property owner." Should have ended the discussion, but Evelyn was undeterred. "This isn't about legality, Mike. It's about community standards and the safety of our residents," she insisted. "The HOA board has the authority to enforce those standards, and the fine stands." As the meeting concluded, Evelyn fixed me with a steely gaze. "You have 30 days to pay the fine, Mr. Holloway. If you refuse, we'll be forced to place a lien on your property and pursue legal action." I stood my ground. "Won't be paying a fine that has no legal basis," I replied. "And I suggest the board consult with an actual real estate attorney before making threats." On my way out, I noticed a brochure on the information table titled "Green Valley Trails." I picked it up and was shocked to see Frank's entire property clearly marked as Green Valley Nature Trails, with no mention that it was private land. That night, I called Frank Williams again to update him on the situation. He sounded tired and frustrated. "Had no idea they were using my land like that," he said. "I've never given anyone permission to build trails or install benches. Property taxes keep going up, and I've been thinking about selling anyway. My medical bills are piling up, and I could use the cash." A thought began to form in my mind. "Frank," I asked casually, "if you're serious about selling, I might be interested in buying. What price would you consider?" As we discussed the details, I realized I might have found the perfect way to turn the tables on Evelyn and her HOA that night. As I researched property ownership laws, I discovered something that made me gasp. The HOA wasn't just using the land without permission. They were actively planning to transform it into an Evelyn Richardson nature park without any consent from the actual owner. The discovery of the park plans changed everything. While digging through public records, I found permit applications filed by the HOA for preliminary development of a community nature park on Frank's land. They'd submitted environmental surveys, applied for grants, and even held fundraisers all for a project on land they didn't own. Attached to the applications were architects' renderings showing walking paths, picnic areas, and at the entrance, a stone sign declaring Evelyn Richardson Nature Park, a Green Valley legacy. The audacity was breathtaking. The next morning, I contacted Amanda Lewis, a 40-year-old real estate attorney recommended by a colleague. She reviewed the documents I had collected and raised her eyebrows. "This is unusual," she said diplomatically. "The HOA has essentially attempted to claim adverse possession of the land, but they haven't met the requirements. In Washington state, they would need to have used the land openly, notoriously, and without permission for at least 10 years. And they would need to pay the property taxes, which clearly Mr. Williams has been handling. Furthermore, their plans to develop the property go well beyond casual use. This is a clear overreach. When I told her I was considering purchasing the land myself, she smiled. That would certainly be an interesting solution. Let me help you make sure everything is above board." Over the next few days, a strange campaign began in the neighborhood. My garbage cans would mysteriously remain at the curb after collection. Anonymous notes appeared on my windshield warning me that animal killers aren't welcome in Green Valley. Several neighbors who had previously been friendly suddenly became distant. Sarah told me she'd overheard Evelyn at a school function warning parents to keep their children away from that dangerous man on Maple Street. The message was clear: conform or be ostracized. While this social pressure campaign unfolded, I was quietly working with Frank Williams and Amanda Lewis to negotiate the purchase of the 80 acres. Frank initially asked for $800,000, but given his eagerness to sell and the property's remote location, we eventually settled on $750,000. It was a steep price, nearly my entire savings, a chunk of an inheritance from my grandparents, but I considered it an investment in both real estate and peace of mind. Amanda expedited the paperwork, and we scheduled the closing for the following week. During this time, I received 3 more notices from the HOA. One for improper garbage can storage, another for unauthorized vehicle parking my own truck in my own driveway because I'd left it there for more than 24 hours while on a business trip, and a third reminder about the hunting violation fine. Now, with added late fees, I filed each one away, following Amanda's advice to document everything but not engage until we'd completed the land purchase. Sarah continued to be my eyes and ears. In the community, Evelyn's holding private meetings with certain homeowners, she reported one evening. They're planning some big announcement about a new community project. There's a fundraising event next month, very exclusive, minimum donation of $1,000. She's been particularly friendly with Daniel Thompson from the city council. I think she's securing permits or approvals for something. Daniel Thompson was a 50-year-old local politician known for supporting development projects, and his connection to Evelyn raised further concerns about what they were planning for Frank's land. I also noticed Trevor Adams, Evelyn's 39-year-old husband and an architectural consultant, surveying the property with measuring equipment. One afternoon, when he spotted me watching from the edge of the woods, he quickly packed up and left. Without acknowledging me, his company, Green Vision Consulting, was listed on the park development applications as the primary design firm for the project. Everything pointed to a well-orchestrated plan to essentially appropriate Frank's land for the HOA's purposes and, specifically for Evelyn's ego-driven vanity project, by the end of the week. I received another visit from Evelyn and Marcus. This time they brought a formal notice of intent to sue if I didn't pay the accumulated fines, now totaling $5,700 with late fees. "This is your final warning, Mason," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "We don't want to take legal action, but the community standards must be upheld." Marcus stood behind her, arms crossed, trying to look intimidating but mainly succeeding at looking uncomfortable. "The board has unanimously approved pursuing legal remedies if you continue to refuse cooperation," he added. I nodded politely. "I understand. You'll have my response within 48 hours. Evelyn seemed surprised by my sudden agreeableness, but recovered quickly. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason," she said with a satisfied smile. "Perhaps you're beginning to understand how we do things in Green Valley." If only she knew what was coming. The very next day, I completed the purchase of Frank's 80 acres. Amanda expedited the final paperwork, and by that afternoon I held in my hands the deed to the property that Evelyn had been treating as her personal domain for years. That night, could hardly sleep, knowing that when Evelyn knocked on my door, the next morning, with her lawsuit in hand, I had in my pocket something that would leave the entire HOA stunned in disbelief. At precisely 9 o'clock the next morning, right on schedule, my doorbell rang. Evelyn stood on my porch, immaculately dressed in a blue blazer and white pants, her hair perfectly styled despite the light drizzle. Marcus Bennett hovered behind her, clutching a leather portfolio that presumably contained their legal threats. "Good morning, Mason," Evelyn said crisply. "I assume you've had time to reconsider your position on the HOA violation." Her tone suggested she expected full capitulation. Her head tilted slightly in that condescending way that had become her trademark. I smiled broadly, stepping aside to invite them in. "Actually, I have something important to discuss with both of you. Please come into the living room." Confused by my friendly demeanor but unwilling to show it, Evelyn strode in with Marcus trailing behind. Once seated, she immediately took control. "Before you begin whatever explanation you've prepared, I should inform you that we've filed paperwork with the county court regarding your violation," she added with practiced magnanimity. "If you're prepared to pay the full amount today, we can still withdraw the filing before it progresses further." "That's very interesting," I replied, maintaining my calm. "But I think you'll want to see this first." I slid a folder across the coffee table. Inside was a copy of the deed to Frank Williams' 80 acres, now bearing my name as the legal owner, along with a survey map clearly showing the boundaries. As of yesterday afternoon, I am the sole owner of the property where the alleged hunting violation occurred. Furthermore, I am also now the owner of all the land where the Green Valley HOA has been illegally creating trails, installing benches, and planning to build a park without the previous owner's permission. The color drained from Evelyn's face. She snatched up the documents, flipping through them frantically while Marcus peered over her shoulder, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "All HOA activities on my property must cease immediately. Any trails, benches, bird feeders, or other installations are there without my permission and must be removed within 7 days. Further," I added, sliding another document toward them, "this is a cease and desist letter from my attorney regarding the fraudulent park development plans. All fundraising and permit applications must be withdrawn immediately." Evelyn stood abruptly, her composure cracking. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. "I've built this community from nothing. Everyone respects my vision. One outsider with a deed won't change that. The HOA board stands behind me completely." I remained seated, maintaining eye contact. "That may be true, but the law stands behind me, and unlike HOA rules, actual property law is enforceable by authorities beyond your control." After they left Evelyn storming out, Marcus scurrying after Highwatch through the window as they hurried across the street to the home of Jessica Parker, no doubt to begin damage control. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with text messages. From Sarah, emergency HOA. "Meeting called for 7 p.m. tonight. Everyone's talking about you buying the hiking land. Evelyn is furious." By afternoon, I had ordered no trespassing signs to be installed around the perimeter of my new land, and hired a contractor to begin placing them the next day. As I prepared to attend the emergency meeting, my doorbell rang again. This time it was Emily Chen, a 39-year-old reporter from the local newspaper. "Mr. Holloway, I'm Emily Chen from the Valley Chronicle. We've received some interesting tips about a dispute between you and the Green Valley HOA. Would you care to comment? Her directness was refreshing after months of passive-aggressive neighborhood politics. I invited her in, explaining the situation while carefully avoiding any comments that could be considered defamatory. Emily took detailed notes, her eyes widening at certain revelations. So you purchased the land legally, and the HOA had been using it without permission all this time. And they were planning to build a park named after their president without consulting the owner? She shook her head in disbelief. This will make quite a story. Just before I left for the meeting, an elderly man approached my house cautiously. He introduced himself as Robert Jackson, a 65-year-old retired accountant who had lived in Green Valley for over 20 years. I need to speak with you privately, he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder, about Evelyn and that land you bought. Inside, Robert revealed that he had served on the HOA board years ago when they first discovered the land was privately owned. Evelyn directed us to forget about finding the owner, he confessed. She said it would complicate things, and that adverse possession would take care of it eventually. I resigned from the board over it, told her it wasn't ethical, but she's been running things her way ever since. Robert also hinted at financial irregularities and how the HOA had been handling funds for the proposed park. They've been collecting special assessments for 3 years for the trail improvement funds, substantial amounts, but the financial reports don't fully account for all the money. When I asked questions at a meeting last year, I was told the detailed accounting was confidential due to ongoing negotiations. This new information was a bombshell. What Robert was describing went beyond HOA overreach, suggested potential financial misconduct. As I thanked him for coming forward, he gripped my arm anxiously. Be careful. Evelyn doesn't lose gracefully. She and her husband have a lot of connections in this town. The revelations from Robert didn't just give me a stronger legal position. It provided me with a weapon that could potentially end Evelyn's reign over Green Valley Estates for good. The emergency HOA meeting that evening was exactly the circus I expected. The community center was packed with residents, many of whom I'd barely exchanged words with in the 2 years I'd lived there. Evelyn stood at the front, her composure restored, though a tightness around her eyes betrayed her anger. We've called this special meeting to address a situation that affects our entire community, she began. Mr. Holloway has purchased the land adjacent to our neighborhood land that has served as our nature trails for over a decade. He is now threatening to cut off access and destroy years of community improvement work. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Evelyn continued her carefully crafted narrative, painting me as an outsider who didn't understand community values, a selfish individual putting personal interests above the collective good. Marcus stood beside her, nodding earnestly at every point. When she finished her speech, she turned the floor over to Trevor Adams, her husband, who unveiled glossy renderings of the proposed Evelyn Richardson Nature Park, complete with walking paths, a playground, and a small amphitheater for community events. All of this is now at risk, he concluded solemnly. Years of planning and fundraising potentially wasted because one person refuses to embrace our community vision. When I was finally allowed to speak, the atmosphere was decidedly hostile. I appreciate everyone's concern, I began, keeping my voice level. But there are some facts you should be aware of. First, this land has always been private property. The previous owner was never contacted by the HOA before trails were built or benches installed. Second, the park plans unveiled tonight were developed without any legal right to the property. And third, most importantly, the fundraising done for this project was conducted under false pretenses. Since the HOA never had any legal claim to the land, the room erupted in a mix of outrage and confusion. Some residents shouted questions about their donations, while others accused me of destroying community amenities. Through the chaos, I noticed Nancy Roberts, the 42-year-old HOA secretary, watching the proceedings with an odd expression, not anger, but something closer to fear. She avoided eye contact when I looked her way. Richard Cooper, the treasurer, also seemed uncomfortable, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to Marcus, after the meeting dissolved into arguing factions. Sarah approached me as I was leaving. That was intense, she whispered, but you've got people talking. Some of the older residents are asking questions about the fundraising. No one seems to know exactly how much was collected or where it all went. She glanced around nervously. Listen, I think Nancy knows something. Been acting strange ever since the park project began. Maybe try talking to her. Over the next 3 days, I watched as my no trespassing signs were installed around the perimeter of my new land. By the second day, half of them had been removed or vandalized exactly as I'd anticipated. I'd installed trail cameras at key points, which captured clear images of Marcus Bennett and several other HOA members trespassing to remove the signs in the middle of the night. These images would prove useful later. But for now, I was more interested in the financial angle Robert had hinted at, working with Amanda Lewis. I filed public records requests for all HOA financial documents related to the Nature Park project, while waiting for those to be processed. I reached out to Nancy Roberts under the pretext of discussing the sign vandalism. She initially refused to meet, clearly frightened, but eventually agreed to talk at a coffee shop 2 towns over where she felt safe from prying eyes. I can't be seen with you, she whispered when we finally met. Evelyn has eyes everywhere. Nancy's revelation was exactly what I needed. As HOA secretary, she had access to all the financial records, including the special nature park development fund that had collected over $75,000 from residents over the past 3 years. The money goes into the fund, but then large chunks are transferred to a consulting company called Green Vision Consulting for preliminary design work and environmental assessments, she explained. The company submits invoices with vague descriptions and receives payment immediately approved solely by Evelyn. Bypassing the normal board approval process for large expenditures. And who owns Green Vision Consulting? I asked, though I already suspected the answer and Nancy confirmed it. Trevor Adams, Evelyn's husband. And there's another partner, Patricia Bennett, Marcus' sister. It's all kept very quiet. The contracts were awarded without competitive bidding, justified as specialized services. Exempt from the normal procurement policy, Nancy slid a flash drive across the table. I've been making copies of everything. I wanted to speak up, but Evelyn made it clear my job at the school district could be at risk if I caused problems. Her law firm represents the district, and she's friends with the superintendent. Armed with this evidence, I contacted Detective Alex Morgan, 40-year-old investigator with the county sheriff's office, who specialized in financial crimes. After reviewing the documents, he agreed there were sufficient grounds for a preliminary investigation into potential embezzlement and misappropriation of funds. This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore, he explained. If they've been soliciting donations for a project on land they knew they didn't own, and then diverting those funds to a company owned by the board president's family, that crosses several legal lines. While the investigation began quietly, Evelyn escalated her campaign against me. A small group of protesters appeared outside my house one morning, carrying signs reading "Save Our Trails" and "Community over Selfishness." Local social media groups filled with posts questioning my character and intentions. The day after the article was published, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney threatening to sue me for defamation and demanding $100,000 in damages for allegedly harming the reputation of the Green Valley States Association and its officers. The letter specifically called out the financial allegations, claiming they were malicious fabrications intended to distract from my own supposed violations. That evening, I received a call from Detective Morgan. "We've obtained preliminary bank records," he said without preamble. In the past 3 years, Green Vision Consulting has received payments totaling $68,000 from the HOA's special fund. The company has only one client, the HOA, and the invoices submitted are charging nearly 3 times the typical rate. We're moving forward with the investigation. She stood in front of the packed room and doubled down on her story. "We will not be intimidated by baseless accusations," she declared. "Mr. Holloway is attempting to deflect attention from his own violations by smearing the reputation of those who have selflessly served this community. Rest assured, the board will defend itself vigorously." As she spoke, I noticed several residents exchange skeptical glances. The facade was starting to crack. Evelyn must have sensed it too, because her tone suddenly shifted and she turned toward me with a cold glare. "You've made a serious mistake, Mason. When this is over, You'll regret ever moving to Green Valley." That public threat, made in front of dozens of witnesses, was exactly what I needed. I left the meeting and called Emily Chen the next morning, inviting her for an exclusive interview. When she arrived, I laid out everything: the HOA financial documents, Green Vision Consulting's ownership and invoice trail, the fundraising flyers, testimonies from Frank and Robert, even the audio clip of Evelyn's threat. Emily's eyes widened as she reviewed it all. "This is extensive," she murmured. "And you're saying the sheriff is already investigating?" I nodded. Detective Morgan's treating this as a financial crimes case, not just an HOA squabble. She promised to publish an online preview that evening. Perfect timing for the emergency HOA meeting. Evelyn had called to strategize against what she labeled as defamatory attacks. Meanwhile, with Amanda Lewis's help, I drafted a formal letter to every resident of Green Valley. It documented the financial irregularities, misused funds, and trail camera images of HOA members vandalizing property signs. I concluded with a proposal. I would create a new public trail on part of my land, legally permitted, maintained, and insured if the current HOA leadership resigned and new transparency measures were implemented. News spread quickly. That afternoon, several residents reported seeing Detective Morgan visiting Richard Cooper and Nancy Roberts' homes. Others said Evelyn was making desperate calls urging people to attend the meeting and stand against me. But her support was crumbling. John Peterson, a retired banker who donated $5,000 to the park fund, was outraged. Cynthia Miller, a longtime Evelyn supporter, publicly demanded an audit of all HOA finances. That night's special meeting was unlike anything Green Valley had seen. The community center was filled beyond capacity with people standing in the parking lot. Evelyn arrived with Trevor and Marcus, trying to maintain control. The moment she tried to call the meeting to order, she was interrupted by shouts. "Is it true your husband's company took HOA money? Why didn't you tell us the land wasn't yours to develop?" Evelyn's voice rose. "These are all lies. Yes, Green Vision Consulting was hired, but everything was approved." "But you didn't disclose the conflict of interest," someone shouted. To everyone's surprise, Richard Cooper broke ranks. "I signed those checks because Evelyn assured me it was above board. I had no idea her husband owned the company." Chaos erupted. Then the doors opened. District Attorney William Hayes entered, flanked by Detective Morgan. They stood at the back, quietly observing. Evelyn saw them and lost control. "This is a witch hunt." "Would you'd rather let a gun-toting outsider block access to nature?" Silence followed. Then Nancy Roberts stood. "That's not true, Evelyn. You hid the ownership facts. You threatened me. You pressured us to approve invoices without proper review. This wasn't about community, it was about you." The crowd erupted again, louder this time, demanding Evelyn's resignation. Marcus tried to speak but faltered. Trevor remained silent, pale and defeated. Hayes took the podium. "In light of this ongoing investigation, I suggest the HOA appoint temporary leadership." Evelyn shook her head. "I will not step down. These accusations are slander, and anyone repeating them will be sued. I will not abandon this community because of one man's vendetta." She stormed out, Trevor and Marcus trailing behind. As the crowd dispersed, people came up to thank me. Sarah gave me a thumbs up. Emily was already interviewing residents. Hayes and Morgan asked me to come in the next morning. "This is no longer just an HOA matter," Hayes said. That night, I received a tip. Storage Unit 23 at Valley Self-Storage. They're emptying it tonight. I called Detective Morgan. The next morning, I found out officers had caught Trevor and Patricia Bennett removing boxes of documents, clear destruction of evidence. The case only got stronger. But Evelyn wasn't done. 2 days later, she announced a community trail preservation walk, a mass trespass on my land. "Bring kids, grandparents, cameras, reclaim our trails," was ready. Amanda and I had the land legally designated as a private wildlife reserve with conservation permits. We posted clear signage, built a secure gate, and even set up an informational kiosk. Saturday morning, Evelyn arrived with about 30 people, all carrying signs. She wore brand new hiking gear, and a camera crew followed her. This is outrageous. She moved toward the gate. 3. Patrol cars pulled up. Detective Morgan stepped out. This is private property. Anyone who crosses will be arrested for trespassing. Mrs. Richardson, organizing this, may be used as further evidence. Evelyn's face turned red. Tell them, Marcus. Marcus backed away. I think we've done enough. Left. Evelyn stood alone, glaring at me. This isn't over, she hissed, but her threat had no weight anymore. Not after everything. A week later, the DA formally charged Evelyn, Trevor, and Patricia with fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of funds. The HOA board was dissolved. Sarah Johnson was named interim president. Her first act, a full audit and new financial rules. The rest of the board apologized publicly. Richard Cooper resigned. As for me, I followed through. I built a real trail with signs, a plaque honoring Frank Williams, posted rules to protect nature. Evelyn and her crew accepted. Plea deals, probation, suspended sentences, repayment of over $100,000, and banned from any HOA or nonprofit leadership roles for 10 years. They sold their house and moved, reputation in ruins. The HOA is still there, but it works for people now, not power. And the $75,000 Evelyn paid back, it became a scholarship fund. Ethics and leadership. Sometimes when you lose something, you find something better. They lost control. We found community in Evelyn. Last I heard, she lives in a tiny apartment. Number HOA at all fitting.